Do you dream of escaping the hustle and bustle of the city? Are you tired of living in a society that doesn't share your values? Then it's time to make your move to the sea. Introducing Seasteading, the future of living on the open ocean. With Seasteading, you can finally be free from oppressive regulations and taxes of traditional society. No more worrying about pesky things like environmental protection or worker safety. On your seastead, you're the captain now. And with a community of like-minded individuals, you'll never have to worry about encountering people with different beliefs or cultures. Plus, with no zoning laws or building codes to worry about, the sky's the limit when it comes to your seastead's design and layout. But seasteading isn't just about escaping the rules of society, it's about creating your own. Want to banish all electronic devices from your seastead? Go for it. Want to hold a weekly costume party? Why not? The possibilities are endless. Sure, you may have to deal with the occasional hurricane or rogue wave, but hey, that's just a part of the adventure. And with limited resources and infrastructure, you'll learn to be resourceful and self-sufficient. But don't worry, you won't be alone. The seasteading community is filled with friendly and supportive individuals who are all working together to create a better way of living. So, what are you waiting for? Join the seasteading movement today and discover a new way of life on the open ocean. Seasteading, because who needs stable ground when you have the open ocean?
Hello there, geographers and general podcast listeners, and welcome back to the Urban Futures podcast, where today we'll be talking about seasteading. Recently, Margot, the founder of Seasteaders United, has come out with a video advertising seasteading as an alternative to classic urban cities. But today, my job is to let you in on what seasteading really is and some of the repercussions of this method of urban planning. And later in this podcast, I'll be interviewing 3 critics of seasteading to hear their insights into this new project. Seasteading is a process that was created as an extension of homesteading, or the lifestyle of practicing complete self-sufficiency. While on land, homesteading takes value in a more agriculturally based, off-grid, and eco-friendly lifestyle. Seasteaders are more focused on the prospect of creating deregulated, permanent settlements located in international waters, where they believe that the laws of land do not apply. Popularized by the libertarian community, seasteading is advertised as a way for like-minded individuals to practice their values freely without the restraints of traditional society, like taxes, political influences, and economic regulations that they deem as oppressive. There have been many attempts at seasteading in the past. However, with new built cities becoming a trend in global urban planning, many new seasteading projects have been proposed as a way of generating startup societies that claim to offer free market for ideas and innovation. Now, as mentioned earlier, I've invited 3 guests to the podcast today to help me explain some of the controversy surrounding seasteading. First, let me introduce Theodore Thunberg, a science editor and Gen Z environmental advocate who is here to talk about the ecological aspect of this movement. Theodore, welcome to the podcast. What's your hot take?
Hello, Sarah. Thank you for inviting me to this lovely chat to debunk the seasteading myth. Now, is the idea possible? No. Simple as that. The advertisement is ridiculous. Like, it's giving techno-optimistic naivety, of the 1960s. No more worrying about environmental protection. Girl, they must not have been following the news. So like last month, the High Seas Treaty was signed at the UN headquarters in New York already, and this is a huge deal. It will protect our marine biodiversity from malicious hands like seasteading. The whole document is kind of long, but what's relevant to us is that for the first time, rules will be applied to any activities in the so-called unexplored open ocean. And there will be marine protected areas in the international waters as well. But it's also not ungoverned. The high seas, not ungoverned, like people would think, The kind of out of sight, out of mind sentiment when we think about the open sea. Like there are hundreds and hundreds of satellite-based surveillance systems in place to make sure that illegal activities like this will not be bypassed. Some examples like the Global Fishing Watch Marine Manager, to name the most prominent. So I would say good luck to seasteaders if they want to sneak around this highly watched territory.
So, if not international waters, then where?
Now, they only have territorial waters and EEZ of host nations left to rely on, like Oceanix Busan in South Korea, the Floating City Project in French Polynesia, and the Seaports by Ocean Builders in Panama. Oh my God, now I just remember their launch last September. Have you heard? Like, it was completely a failure. In front of the president of Panama, their prototype flipped over. It's giving secondhand embarrassment, All of these nearshore projects are very questionable for me in terms of their impact on local ecosystems.
So could you lay your hands on some of their environmental impact assessment?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've been requesting environmental impact assessments from them to no avail though, because I know they've been making quite some progress on their seaport prototype since 2021. So one thing I have to applaud them is their well-intentioned 3D printed coral reef initiative. recently, which they have launched, I give them the benefit of the doubt. Now, I have a little note on that. We have to be cautious here because the natural and the artificial coral reefs can encourage fish and marine life population and frequency in the area. Scientists have proved that biodiversity differs between these two kind of reefs. So at the end of the day, we have to keep in mind that what causes the corals of natural reefs to die, i.e. seasteading, for example, will also impact the corals which begin to grow on artificial reefs. So until we have a grasp on the holistic impact of sea pots, we can't really say whether their 3D reefs are beneficial or not to the ecosystem. So I guess what I want to say is that these green efforts here and there can blind critics from the larger holistic environmental impact that a development project has on their surrounding environment, which is, an all too familiar tactic that many urban development projects have been doing, hailing small efforts to make big compromises bad for the environment.
Thanks, Theodore. I really had no idea that seasteading was so closely integrated with the destruction of marine environments. Now, to further some of your points, I've invited Emma onto the pod, a government official from French Polynesia who has recently been under fire from the libertarian community since her recent Twitter battle with libertarian Nepo baby Patrice Friedman, head of the Seasteading Institute. Emma, what was that about?
Sarah. Unfortunately, Patrick Friedman didn't appreciate it when I told him that it's hard to get support from government when your idea is based on eliminating government. My country, French Polynesia, originally signed a memorandum of understanding with the Seasteading Institute where they would build seasteads in our waters, but this agreement ended up falling through because we saw seasteading as a solution to rising sea levels, but it turned out that they didn't share our values and just cared about building their autonomous libertarian society.
And how would that society have been structured?
Maybe Petri doesn't want to hear this, but his idea for an autonomous society makes no sense logistically. Seasteaders insist that if you don't like the community you live in, you can just move to another one. But what kind of people are able to pack up and leave wherever they want, especially if you live in a seasteading community, which are really hard to build? It's funny because they claim that seasteads can have any government system that they want. However, the Seasteading Institute's website itself admit any seastead is governed by international law that applies to the open ocean. That's kind of contradictory. Additionally, they want to be libertarian outposts, but they keep pursuing agreements with existing governments to build seasteads in their territorial waters, where these local governments' laws would apply. That's a bit confusing. But, of course, this doesn't matter because it's not going to happen anyways. Now that their sugar daddy, Peter Thiel's cash flow has run dry, the seasteaders have to rely on Bitcoin crowdfunding to fund their dreams. So, good luck with that.
Wow, Emma, thanks. I think it's really important for people to know how seasteading is such a regulated and politically involved practice, especially considering that they advertise it as providing the opposite. Now, our last guest today is Sarah T., an urban studies scholar who has been a catalyst in writing about seasteading initiatives and new seasteading projects around the world. Sarah, welcome to the podcast. You recently collaborated with Dr. Sarah Moser to write about some of the new city projects emerging in the global south. Would you care to enlighten us on some of your findings?
Absolutely. Sarah, thank you for having me on the podcast. Dr. Moser and I have been closely examining the emergence of new city projects in the global south, including several seasteading initiatives currently in development. While these projects have been marketed as innovative solutions to urban challenges, there are several concerns that we still need to identify. Firstly, many of these projects are being developed with the backing of private investors and corporations, raising questions about who will actually benefit from these new cities and who will be left behind. There are concerns that these projects may primarily benefit the interests of the wealthy rather than the wider community and may exacerbate existing regional inequalities. Secondly, many of these projects need more consultation or input from the local communities affected by them. There are concerns that this approach may lead to a lack of accountability and transparency, and that the need and perspectives of local people needs to be addressed.
Could you elaborate more specifically on how these issues of urban planning show up in seasteading?
Yeah, of course. In terms of seasteading specifically, there are concerns about these projects' practicality and sustainability. Building and maintaining settlements on the ocean is incredibly challenging and expensive, and whether these projects are economically viable in the long term is still being determined. Thank you very much for inviting me to discuss these critical issues on the podcast today, Sarah.
No worries. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and for writing another fantastic article, Sarah. It looks like our time is up. So I just wanted to thank our guests once again for joining me today and for sharing their thoughts on seasteading and its impacts. And as always, a great big thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to Urban Futures, and we'll see you next week.